All right, so our final step in this process is to put our aggregate demand and aggregate supply curves together to create our basic model. And because we have three curves, this is going to look just a little bit different, but mostly the same as using a basic supply and demand model. So start to do a little bit of drawing. We're going to have a downward sloping aggregate demand curve, as we know, and we're going to have an upward sloping SRAS curve. And this point, this moment of intersection, and this equilibrium point that we're going to create right here is what we call a short run equilibrium. And a short run equilibrium is simply how the economy is operating right now. Right? So this moment represents how the economy is functioning and operating at the given moment. And just like a normal equilibrium point, we are going to see that that intersects on the x-axis with a level of real GDP that we can abbreviate as YE, and it's going to intersect on the y-axis with a price level that we will start as price level E, or price level equilibrium. So the most basic starting point is we draw our short run equilibrium and we say this is what the economy is doing. It's producing this much output and it's doing so at this price level. But we know that this model is a little bit different from our regular supply and demand model because of the LRAS curve. So how does the LRAS curve drop into this? Well, what we really do is, for the starting point, we drop the LRAS curve right down the middle of this model. And what we have to remember is that this LRAS curve is always vertical at a point that we call YP, or potential output. And when the LRAS curve, our potential output in the economy, is lined up with our short run equilibrium, then this economy is now said to be in a long run equilibrium. In other words, what we're saying is that the current output of the economy, YE, is equal to the potential output in the economy. So our level of output now is matching the level of output that we expect our economy to be able to produce. And because YP is also YFE, full employment, or output when the economy is at the natural rate of unemployment, then we can also conclude that in this economy, our unemployment rate right now is equal to the natural rate of unemployment. So where we are when we look at this model right away is we're saying this is showing us the current level of output based on the SRS and the AD model, and it's showing us the potential level of output. And when those three things all align together, we say this model is in a long run equilibrium. In other words, the model is producing where we want it to produce. The economy is producing where we want it to produce. As a quick side note on this, I always like to say that the LRAS in essence is our goalpost. It is showing us if the model is doing what we want it to do. So, how can this model look different and operate differently? There are two other scenarios that we can imagine based on this. So we can draw two more quick AD and SRAS models, and we can create a short run equilibrium at YE and PLE. And we'll do this 2 times side by side. Well, let's start with one scenario. What would happen, or what would it mean in our economy? So let's start with one scenario on the left. What would happen, or what would it mean in our economy if the LRAS were positioned to the right of our short-run equilibrium, or you could say it the other way, their short-run equilibrium is to the left of our LRAS? Well, what we could see immediately is that our current level of output, YE, is less than our potential level of output. So we could say current output is less than potential. And this would also mean that unemployment must be greater than the natural rate of unemployment. And we would call this scenario, in essence, a recession or a recessionary gap. You will also sometimes see this called a contraction because the economy must be contracting. So any time that our current equilibrium point is to the left of our long-run aggregate supply curve, we know that our current output is low and we are not at potential. And of course, we could also imagine the opposite of this. What would happen if our current level of output, YE, were greater than our potential level of output, right? So we could come here and we could say current output is greater than potential. And we could also infer from that that our current unemployment rate must be less than the natural rate of unemployment because our economy is overproducing. Our economy is making more and putting more resources to work. And this scenario would be called an expansion, or sometimes called an inflationary gap, because our current level of output is greater than our potential level of output. And so as a final thought on this, what we really spend our time doing with this model is we spend our time, just like a basic supply and demand model, manipulating our short-run equilibrium and then trying to figure out what is happening in regards to our long-run equilibrium and our potential output. So I'll give you one really quick example of this, but let's just go with something pretty straightforward, and we'll say something like businesses decrease their spending. Maybe we have a business confidence issue. So we would say, all right, businesses decrease their spending. We're in a long-run equilibrium, but when businesses decrease their spending, we know that investment spending is going to go down, and when investment spending goes down, we know that aggregate demand is going to decrease. So then we come into this model, and we grab our aggregate demand curve, and we shift this aggregate demand curve to the left, and we say, well, we now have AD2, a lower level of spending in the economy caused by a decrease in investment spending. And just like in a regular supply and demand model, that is going to create a new equilibrium in the short run on our SRAS. And we'll see that our output level is going to decrease and our price level is going to decrease. But what we now see is that our new output level is not lined up with potential. And so we have moved this economy to the point where Y2 is less than potential output. And that means we have moved this economy into a recession. So this point right here, and any point to the left of YP, now represents a recession. So in your practice problems, you're going to start in almost all scenarios by drawing an economy in potential output in its long-run equilibrium where YP is lined up with YE, and then we're going to start making shifts away from that. In some scenarios moving forward, we'll start to practice tomorrow, we will start in a recession or start in an expansion. So we'll start in this model here, and then we'll talk about what could we do to resolve this problem, to take this and get YE to line back up with YP. So take a few minutes, practice drawing this, practice reading this, and see what you can do with it.